Hello everyone and welcome to the final 20 in 20 project in the Ruby on Rails tutorial series. We've come a long way in this series. I know this video's been delayed quite a bit, but hopefully it lives up to the hype. Today, we're going to cover a few different topics. First, we're going to reuse one of our previous projects. Again, I know, but we're going to take the Rails API and the Vue project and we're going to use them one final time. I feel like at this point, we're probably comfortable with the fundamentals of Rails and the fundamentals of Vue, so we're just going to skip over those parts. We're going to take what we did in part 19 and we're going to extend it a little bit further. We're going to take our Docker container and we're going to put our Docker container onto DigitalOcean apps. So we're going to be serving our Docker container Rails application from a remote server. Now we're not deploying it in production. It's just going to be a development Docker container, but we're going to be using this Docker container in a unconventional way, in the sense that we're going to be connecting it to, I guess I shouldn't say unconventional because other applications like Discord and Spotify and even Visual Studio Code do stuff like this. But we're going to be taking this Docker container and we're going to be serving the data that REST API provides to a front-end application that is going to be running as a desktop app. So we're going to take our Vue project and we're going to wrap our Vue project into something called Electron. And that's going to allow us to serve our Vue project just like we would in a website, but instead it's going to be in a Chromium browser that's installed as a desktop application. So we're going to build our Electron project and we're actually going to manually install it onto the machine, and then we'll open up the Windows logo and you can see it appear when I search for the project. Now on the flip side of this, if you build this project on Linux, you can also install it as a Linux app. I think you just need to do --no--sandbox to run it as a Linux application. You'll obviously need to do a little bit more of the setup, and depending on how you want to install it, you might use like Wix on Windows, or you might have to create your spec file on Linux. But the basics are there where you can tell someone, go download this application. They'll download it. It'll connect to your Docker image, wherever that may be, and it'll grab the data from there. So think like with Discord, you might connect to the remote server. And then once you have a connection, so you're online, then the actual application starts up. And that's where Electron says, hey, Docker, give me the goods. And Docker says, here's your stuff. So we're going to be setting that up. This was done on the live stream. So, I'm planning on doing some more of those live streams in the future. If you're interested, please check it out. It's twitch.tv/dnout. I also do them on YouTube, but I would like to move those over to Twitch at some point, so I'm not flooding you guys with notifications. So consider following me on Twitch. It helps me out. I'm still trying to get affiliate because I don't really stream that much right now. So every follow will help me there. But I think that's enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and let's build our final project in this series. All right, so let's start off by, for one final time, cloning a previous week's project. In this case, we're going to be cloning our week 19 project. So if you come over to github.com/dnout/20 in 20, this link will be in the video description, and you go to week 19, and then you go into video. We're trying to grab this project because it has both the Ruby on Rails application as the back end and the Vue application as the front end. We want this one instead of the other weeks because week 19, the back end has this Docker file. And as we covered in episode 19, this Docker file will clone an OS that we need. It'll install the dependencies we need, and then it'll add in the gem file and all the other stuff that we need as well and run our application on port 3000. So we'll go ahead and we'll clone that. Now I've already cloned this locally because I have it in on my local machine. But if you'd like it, just head over to this location, click on code, and then copy whatever you'd like to clone, and then just run git clone that project into whatever directory you're in. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do now that we have these projects cloned is I would actually like to create our own repository for the backend. So for this, I'm going to come over to my terminal. I'm going to cd into backend, and I'm going to do a git init in the backend. And then I'm going to do a git status, git add dot, git commit -am init commit. And now we're going to come over to GitHub or whatever version control software you'd like. I'm going to be using GitHub for this, and I'm going to create a new repository. The reason we're doing this is because, as we saw during the live stream, the Rails project has to be at the root of the DigitalOcean app for it to understand which application it's running. So for this, we're just going to say week 20 video. And then we'll just say this is the repository for week 20's backend code. And then we'll leave it public. We'll just create a default repo here. And then I'm going to change over to SSH, make sure I have all my commands set up. And then I'm going to push to this repository. So I'm going to copy these commands. I'll paste them in. Do the same for this one. And then the same for this one. That should push our code up to this remote branch. And if I refresh, we should see it up here. And now we're going to go over to DigitalOcean. With the backend, there is one step we'll have to change, but we won't actually know what that step is until we create our app. So the first push we're going to do here is going to fail, but that's okay. Once we're in DigitalOcean, we can click Create, and we can click Apps. And if you would like to follow along with DigitalOcean, I'll leave an affiliate link in the video description, and that'll give you 25, or I think it's 2 months of $100 credit or something. And then if you spend $25, I get $25. So it helps me, but it also helps you. I'm just making sure I disclaim that affiliate partnership there like a good boy. So now we'll click on repository, and then we need to find the repository we just made. So in my case, it's week 20 video. So I'll just search for week 20 video. I'll click that. It understands that branch main is the one we'd like to use. Then we'll click next. Now I do believe it will find out that we have a Docker file, and it'll hopefully understand how to use that. Looks like it does. Your type, you're just going to leave as a web service. The rest of these things we'll leave as defaults. Now you can add a database, but that'll require some additional configuration. In this case, we're not making this a persistent app. So we're not adding a database here, which means whenever we push up changes, the database on this web server will be wiped clean. So you won't have data here still. If you wanted that to persist in a regular application, you'd have to add a database. But also, since we're using a Docker file and we don't have a volume in here, so at no point are we saying give this a volume. This data would also still not persist unless this was communicating with the database you added here. So at both of these stages, you would need to add some sort of volume or something so that it understands that it needs to persist this data. You could point this to the database, that would be fine. Or if you want the database inside the app, you would then have to make sure that there's a volume where the database is shared so that Docker understands, hey, we're backing up this data. But okay, let's click next. We'll move to the next page, and now it should hopefully, if we click next again, it'll ask us what we'd like to pay, and then it says starter plan $5, but then it bumps you up to $10, but you don't want to do that, so then you go down to $5 again, which makes your total monthly cost $5. So of course that $100 credit is kind of overkill. It'll get you 2 months though, because the credit is good for 2 months, I believe. And now this should start deploying. And at this point, this will take a while because it has to run through the entire Docker file to set all of this up. And that'll take a bit. So while that's running, we're going to come over to this website, Smashing Magazine. I'll have a link to this in the video description as well if you'd like. But the basic idea is we need to add Electron to our Vue project to get the desktop portion of this working. And for this, you have a few choices. Now, because we want to build on Windows, Electron doesn't understand, as far as I'm aware, how to do that unless you're running the commands on Windows. So you're going to have to open up a PowerShell. In my case, I'll just open up a new tab in Windows Terminal. This is running PowerShell, so I'm now on the Windows side of my computer. And then you're going to have to install NPM and all that other stuff to get your node packages up and running. And once you have your usual tool set, you can create a Vue project. You're then going to need to navigate to wherever you'd like to create this directory. So in my case, I'm going to be building this off my desktop. So I'll come over to desktop, I'll say week 20, and I should have a video folder here. So I would like to navigate here. So I'll just say, let's cd to this directory. And then once I'm in this directory, I'm going to need to copy the files over from the Linux side of things. So in Linux, I'll cd up, and I'll make sure I have my front end. I'll cd into my front end real quick. That way I can check. It doesn't have any node modules. That's good. Make sure your node modules don't exist. Otherwise, this clone could take a long time. Now we'll say cp-r. We'll copy front end. And then we want to copy it to our MNT. So this is our mounted drives. And over here, we were in the C drive. So we'll go to C, then users. And then in my case, my username is Dean. I'll move to the desktop. I'll say I want to go to week 20. And then I want to go to week 20 video. And I want to copy it to this location. I'll hit enter. Over here, you should see it appear. It just did. That's good. So now we can come over to PowerShell. And we can say, let's cd into front end. And then we can run an npm install on the front end. And this command will work just like we would expect it to. Once this is done, we'll then be able to add in our Electron. This is still running, as you can see. It's going to be stuck at 17% because I believe this is the percentage where it runs the Docker file and all that other jazz. Okay, and it looks like our front end finished first. So let's go ahead and let's just try to run a npm run serve to see if things are working. Hopefully this will work, and then we can navigate to localhost port 8080 to see this run up in our machine. Now, with the Rails API running locally, we could have some to-dos here, but right now this isn't connected to anything, so this won't work. If we check our Docker, this is currently still in the build process, but we can at least see if we can build this as Electron. So let's try to add Electron to this project. So I'm going to scroll through here real quick because I don't actually know what these commands are off the top of my head. Looks like the first one we need to do is an npm install electron --save -dev. And that'll install Electron as a developer dependency. And then we can come down here because I think there's one other command we have to add. And it should be right here. So after we run that and we have our Vue project, which in this case we already do, we then need to add Electron Builder. So then we can call Vue add Electron -builder. And this will add the Electron Builder to our project. And this will allow us to actually run our project as an Electron app. Looks like DigitalOcean has finally completed the build process. So if we scroll up to the top, we should see a link here. We're going to need this in a second. But if we click on this, we'll get a brand new error from Rails 6, which is exciting. And it just says you have to add this config host into your environment configuration. So let's come into backend. Let's go into config, environments, and we're running this in developer mode. So we'll go into development.rb, and then wherever we feel like it, we'll just paste this in. We'll save this, and then we'll push these changes up. So we've saved this. Let's come over here. Let's do a git status. We'll have a couple files here. We'll do a git add. And then we want to do a git add for, I guess, oops, we actually need to go into cd into backend, I believe. And then in here, we'll do a git status. And here we just want to add this. So say git add dot git commit -am add host to config dev environment or something. And then we can say git push. And then once we run this git push command, if we come up back over to DigitalOcean, just like I said before, you'll get wiped whenever you push up a change, and you should see this start rebuilding again. And then of course, while this is rebuilding, it'll run through the whole Docker file again, but that's fine because we do have other things to do in the meantime. So now let's come over here. It's going to ask us in the Vue portion of things if we want to add Spectron. I'm going to hit no because I'm not interested in it. And then it'll proceed with the installation of the Electron build tools. Okay, and now that we've done that, we can now run npm run electron serve. It's actually npm run electron :serve. I should probably be specific about that for anyone here that hasn't used npm before. And then you'll see our magic little window pops open. I actually have my dev tools open already. So I'll close those. And you'll see this is just a regular desktop application. It's got a file, there's an edit, there's a view, window, and help. And if you ever end up disabling any of these, let's say maybe you disable your dev tools, just try to remember it's Control-Shift-I, at least on Windows and Linux, to open up your dev tools, and then you can debug here just like you normally would. So let's say I want to run an alert, say alert test, I'll run that. You can see it works just like normal JavaScript because at the end of the day, this is just a web browser, but it looks like an application. And if we actually build this using Electron Build, we can install this as an application. So let's go ahead and let's give that a try while DigitalOcean tries to catch up, because apparently today it is playing the tortoise and the hare bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's clear this console. And in this case, all we want to do is we want to run npm run electron :build. And this will actually build it as an application. So once this runs, we can navigate over, and I'll just try to move this over and make things a bit more readable. You can then navigate over to the dist electron folder inside of your front-end application on your Windows machine. And this is the part where you would want to run this on Windows instead of Linux, because right here, this Win Unpacked, if you were running this in WSL, I'm pretty sure this would be Linux Unpacked, which would be fantastic if you were trying to create a Linux desktop application. But in this case, we're trying to target Windows, so we run it on Windows. So we come over to Win Unpacked, and you can actually see some stuff getting created here. This is our installer. So if we wanted to, we could run this right now, but I'm going to go into Win Unpacked first. I just like to open this frontend.exe file right here. Let me just zoom in a bit. It has the Electron image. Of course, you can change all of these things. It is configurable JavaScript. Largely, you'll be changing these settings like the image icon and stuff, but overall, any of your GUI things, you'll probably be doing through Vue. If you need to do file management, that's where you might go into Electron again. But largely, if it's just a website you're hosting through a desktop application, you can probably ignore most of that. But okay, you can see here we have our build. It's very fancy. It still has DevTools enabled, so you can open up the console when it's built. And this is where you're going to run into an issue. In the developer version, when you run Electron Serve, works just like you would expect it to. You can run Electron Serve. If you set your, if I come over here, if you set your store API to target the proper URL, this will work just fine in the developer version. So if I open this, you can see, yay, we're writing Ruby on Rails. If we target this specific URL with our Electron app running, so we can say npm run electron serve, and then we come over here, we can actually go to the location of our app and then /API/v1/todos. If we hit enter, you can see that I pushed this up with the database because of course I did. But you can actually access this just fine from a Electron application where you change the URL to this. I say that, but I seem to be running into some issues here. And it looks like that's because I didn't target the right URL. So let's copy all of this. We need the API v1 to-dos. We'll paste all of that into the quotes here. We'll save this, and then we'll reload the Electron application. And hopefully we should, I might have to restart it here. Yeah, so let's restart it. So we'll just close it out, and then we'll run npm run electron serve again. Because this was a bug I ran into during the live stream where I couldn't get the to-dos to populate properly. And it looks like I'm still running into some issues here. But the basic idea is you need to, inside of, let me just check what this was called. It looks like it is in the, where is this? Should be in the background.js. Now, this is my Linux version of the code. So let me actually come over to the Windows terminal. I'll run a code dot inside this front end because this is the version we're using. This is the old front end from before, so we don't actually need that. So let me full screen this one. in here inside source, you should have a background.js file. And inside this file, you should see web preferences. And below this, what we can do is we can actually say webSecurity : false. And that should fix our Electron issue. Now, just to check, let me try to run an npm run serve to see if we can access localhost port 8080. And of course, I've just realized where my error was before. We need to grab this path to the API, and we need to put this inside of our Windows store because that's the actual application we're trying to serve right now. So if we come in here and we change this, we should, in theory, see our front end update, and we now have our to-dos from our API. So that's why you do things correctly. Otherwise, you run into issues. So make sure you're editing your Windows version if you're hosting this, if you're attempting to build the Windows desktop, and not the version that you cloned over in WSL if you're using the same workflow as me. So you can see here I'm deleting a lot of these to-dos. I have quite a few of them, but hopefully we'll start to see them shrink. And if we come over here, you can see this bar is pretty big. If we refresh, it is now significantly, I guess there's significantly fewer items here. So that seems to be working. Now that I've figured out what I was doing wrong, let's try to do a npm run electron serve to see if we can at least get the dev server to work now. And hopefully it will. I probably should have removed this, but the dev server should show us some of the to-dos. It does. So we now have a desktop application that's accessing our API that's hosted on our DigitalOcean app. That's pretty cool. So let's delete some of these and see if we can delete all of these. I seem to be running into some 404 errors, probably because I'm mashing the button really quick. And it looks like it wasn't happy with me for that. That's fine. That's what happens when you click the budget options. We'll just delete a few more of these. Keep going. Keep going. I imagine I made a lot of these during the first video where we touched this. So we can refresh, and we'll refresh over here. Now there's 2 left. So we'll say, this is our final to-do from development. We'll hit enter, and we'll refresh our API, and that seems to be working. Okay, now let's try to do a proper build so that we can install this and we can search for it on our machine. So let's close this, and then we'll say npm run electron build to attempt to build our Electron application. And then once this is done, we can come into our folder inside video, front end. If we go into our dist Electron, once this is done, we'll activate the installer and we'll very quickly install this application and hopefully have a very good time. Okay, that seems to have worked. Let's go ahead and let's run our front end setup. So we'll double click this. You'll see some things appear on the screen. Depending on how fast your computer is, should work. This will take a second, and there you go. You now have essentially the same window as before, but you'll notice I'm not running this. I can actually close this PowerShell, and I can close my Linux. I can say, oh, look, it's still here. And then if I want to take this a step further, I can hit the Windows key, search for front end, and I should see an Electron application appear right here. If I open this, you can see it's the exact same one that's touching the API. Hello from our desktop app. This is Vue calling. Is Ruby on Rails there? Question mark. We'll hit submit. Looks like that worked. Check. And now for our final to-do, week 20 of the 20 in 20 challenge. We'll create our to-do and we'll mark it as complete, refresh our API, and we have a completed to-do. And that is going to do it for the final tutorial in this series. I will see you guys in the outro video. Okay, and for the final time in this series, that's going to do it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something. I hope the series overall provided you with some value, and I hope that you walk away from this series feeling a bit more confident using a wide variety of tools as opposed to just Ruby on Rails to solve your problems. My goal with this series was never to get you up to speed as an advanced Rails developer strictly on Rails, because quite frankly, that experience comes with the experience. That's not something I can distill into you. That's just something that you have to learn by doing on your own. But I can give you an introductory view into all these other tools that you might touch. You might not use all of them. Chances are you won't use Electron because honestly, I hate it. Everyone hates it. But you might end up at a company like Discord, or you might end up working on a tool like Visual Studio Code. So maybe you need to use Electron. At the very least, it gives you an idea of how you can take these things and wrap them in Docker containers or Electron applications, or serve your data from your Rails project to another front-end server, client, whatever. And you get that experience of what it's like in industry where not all of your tools are in the same tech stack, and sometimes things aren't ideal and you have to find ways to work around them. Like you have to disable your security sometimes, or you disable it all the time because you hate security. Security gross, security bad. But hopefully this has helped you. This has provided you with some value, and hopefully you continue to join me for future tutorials, both for Ruby on Rails and for other projects and whatever else I decide to upload to the channel. But for one final time, thank you so much for watching. I hope this series helped, and I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.